about strategy in a fast-paced world. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Stein Heckroth, co-founder and executive director, Lateral Dimensions, and senior lecturer at USB Executive Development. He's an author of Systems Thinking, Game Over. Dr. Stein is an international expert on systems thinking and business strategy. As a co-founder and executive director of Lateral Dimensions, the strategy consulting concern, he empowers businesses by enhancing their sustainable competitiveness. He is a faculty member at Stellenbosch University Business School, an executive development company, and has also acted as facilitator for the Business School of the Netherlands, the Da Vinci Institute, and the University of Stellenbosch Institute for Futures Research. Dr. Heckroth's interest is managing complexity in 21st century has led him to obtaining his PhD in business, environmental scaling, and complexity. This has further resulted in groundbreaking thought processes that impact directly on strategic thinking, pivotal in providing business with the means to retaining their competitiveness. Stein received his PhD as well as MBA from the University of Stellenbosch. He is the author of the recently published book, Strategic Thinking, Game Over. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Heckroth.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. I must say, I've been hearing about all the business schools up here in the north. All morning I feel a little bit like a Stormer supporter that's coming to watch the Stormers playing the Blue Bulls on their home ground. But nonetheless, thank you very much for that warm introduction. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I always say these days, to me, it's an absolute honor, and I specifically say these days, I'll tell you why just now, it's an absolute honor and a privilege if I have a room full of people that voluntarily actually pay to listen to me. And the reason for that is my son recently turned 13. He's now what we call a teenager. So at best what I get from him when I talk with him at home is can I go now? So I really appreciate you being here. I've also decided to make some changes to what I've prepared based on what I've heard so far this morning. I recently attended a ceremony where our CEO, Frik Landman, made a comment which I think is very, very true and very accurate. He said that anybody that delivers a speech normally has 3 speeches prepared. The one is that you prepare before the time. The other one is the one that you prepare in your head after your speech as you walk back to your seat. And the third one is the one that you actually deliver, which is what I'm going to try and do now, with some adaptation, because I do think it's necessary for me to reflect on some of the things that has been said so far. From my introduction, you would have heard that I'm not in HR. What I am in, however, is in strategy. And the focus of our strategy is very much HR. We look specifically at what is necessary in an organization to achieve sustainable competitiveness. So when Chart, like he did this morning, refers to having the right people on the bus, our question would typically be, define the right people. What are the kind of people that you're looking for? So it's not good enough to just say that we need the right people. Somebody needs to actually put up their hand and say, well, this is what the right people, the so-called right people, looks like. I also do a lot of work in a newly established organization called Empower Intelligence. And what we do there is going to organizations that are struggling with BEE compliance. And as opposed to doing an activity of compliance, because that's an easy exercise to go through, it's basically a tick box exercise, to ask the question and to say, but how are you going to take conformance to performance? How are you going to ensure that your newly structured staff component performs better than the one that you had before? So we ask very deep rooted, serious, strategic questions to organizations, but they all go back to, or they all talk very strongly to the staff component, the personnel component, the HR component, the people component, call it what you like. Somebody needs to do the job. And it's on that basis that I've been asked to come and share some thoughts with you today, which I'm going to try and do my absolute best at, and I'm going to try and share as much newness with you as possible. A little bit about my style, which I'm going to try for this morning, is I'm going to try and let you leave here feeling very uncomfortable. I think a lot of the things that we've heard so far, and I must compliment the previous speaker, in a way I hate it when they have such a good speaker before me. You know? Peter Drucker once said, and pardon the example, but it's the example he used, and I don't want to therefore lie about the example, but he said to talk after a good speaker is almost like showing a pornographic movie to somebody that just engaged in sex. It's a little bit of an anti-climax. So I'm going to do my best to at least try and live up to some of the standard that you've set, but thank you very much. Other than that, what I want to say is, a lot of the things that I've heard so far this morning is sort of old news. And that gets academia like us very excited. You see, I have an advantage because I'm a consultant, but I'm also an academic. So I can decide when I want to play the academic card. There's a lot of freedom in the academia. People sometimes say, yeah, it's all theory. But you know how much freedom there is in theory, because I can actually now say whatever I want and I can question you, and I have the research to found my questions on, which might leave you a little bit uncomfortable. And that's what I'm going to try. Because I think we need to think differently about a whole lot of things that we're at the moment doing. We have our boxes, the matrices, the Drotter pipelines. We have all of those processes and succession planning, matrices and procedures in place. But I want to challenge you and say that that's not enough. And my challenge is coming from the outside. Let me use Charles' example again and tell you what I mean by that. It's not good enough to say that, you know, we just simply pray that it rains enough. It's not good enough. As long as you believe that you are in the business of agriculture, it's good enough to say that we will pray for enough rain. The day, however, that you discover that you're actually in the business of water, you start thinking about water quite differently. Gibbs's magazine, The Acumen, wrote a beautiful article on water and how challenged we are on the continent with water. And as opposed to taking the let's pray for rain approach, people have started to do research, and they've discovered that dams are one of the worst ways of maintaining a level of enough water, because we lose so much due to evaporation. It's almost unthinkable. Dams, I mean, you know, that's the first thing that goes through my head when we don't have enough water. Where I come from, Cape Town, I've got a place in Clanwilliam because I love water skiing. And for 8 years now, government's been promising us they're going to raise the dam wall. And we're now saying, please just raise the dam wall, you know, with a little bit of an accentuated difference. But in that lies our security. That if the wall is higher, we have more water. And you have experts that is telling us that's completely the wrong way in which you think about it. Companies that have made that change, for instance, is a company like SAB. They will tell you that they're not in the beer industry. They will tell you that they are in the water industry, because their product effectively consists out of water. So water conservation is as much their concern as what is sustainable competitiveness. It's not for a government to just build infrastructure, or for the gods to send us rain. It's for us as businesses to start thinking differently about this. Now, where's the different thoughts going to come from? And this is where I fundamentally differ with most experts, because we expect the innovativeness, the newness, the great ideas to come from the leaders in the organization. And by leaders, I mean the executive. And I'm saying it's not going to come from them. It needs to come from your staff. It needs to come from the people that work face to face with a customer on a daily basis. We can't expect our leaders to come up with all the great ideas out there. I recently did an experiment with my son. He's a bit of a computer, let's say, he loves his computers. And he's a gamer. Now, initially as a parent, it frustrated and it irritated me that he spends the entire weekend playing games. Why? Well, partially maybe because I'm concerned about it, but the most important reason dawned on me. I know nothing about gaming. Nothing about gaming. But I can guarantee you this. With my skills, my ability, my expertise, my experience, I'll put together a CV, I guarantee you, that will make me very employable as a CEO of a gaming concern. And that got me thinking. That got me thinking. I did an experiment with him. I said to him, okay, I'll be the world's best dad. You and your buddies are allowed to stay in your, what he calls his command center, from the Friday afternoon 4 o'clock until the Sunday afternoon 4 o'clock. You never need to go out. As a matter of fact, you're not allowed to come out. You've got to stay there for 48 hours. He chose 5 friends. The only reason why they were allowed to ever leave that room was if they wanted to go to the toilet. They had to sleep there, eat there, everything else. I gave them a credit card. They had 500 Rand limit on the credit card to spend, and I said, there you go, you've got 48 hours. Of course, they had a ball. They really thought I was the dad of the century. But I did it because I wanted to learn something from my child. I wanted to learn things from him that as a CEO of my own organization and as a senior lecturer at a very well-known business school, I have forgotten because I'm not 13 anymore. But I realize I need to know how the 13-year-old's head works. Otherwise, I might be out of the business. Here's what he told me about 3 days later. Anyway, they had a ball. They had a couple of challenges that I gave them. One, they had to feed themselves. They weren't allowed to use any telephones or cell phones. It was only, everything was via computer. So you can very well imagine that the staple food of that weekend was Coke and pizza. All right? No rules. They slept in there. It smelled like hell on the Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, and they only left to go to the toilet, but that was it. And one of the things I noticed when I opened the office was that there was a pizza box with the name Scooters on it. So here I go, Mr. Senior Lecturer. Here I go. Sorry about that. I just want to take this thing off. I normally put it on flight mode, and we won't have that problem. So here I go, Mr. Senior Lecturer. What do I do? Product, place, promotion, price. Product, scooters. Price must have been a good price. Place, well, you got it on the computer. Promotion must have been a nice ad. Because that's how I think. Because that's the world I come from. So I take him through the main road about 3 days later in Durbanville, the town where I stay in. And I said to him, look, Josh, there's your pizza place, Scooters. They've got a very nice Scooters on the main road, where you ordered your pizza from. You know what he says to me? In a nice way. I know it sounds cocky, but he didn't mean it like that. He says to me, Dad, I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, I got the pizza from the internet. He said, and it was never advertised to me. I was Skyping with my friend in Dubai. He told me that last time when they visited South Africa, he had a pizza from Scooters and it was very nice. And he said it happened to be good value for money. It wasn't too expensive and it tasted nice. So, the customer of today ain't looking for product. They're looking for a solution. It's a different mindset. They're also definitely not waiting for you to promote your product. They're not looking for promotions. They're seeking information. And they definitely do not look at price. What they're after is value. And as far as our old plans of place, distribution, I'm going to have to set up there where there's plenty of feed is concerned, they're long beyond that. For them it's about accessibility. And that got me thinking. Because I didn't get that from a CEO. I got that from a 13-year-old customer. So I'm a firm believer that one of the things you need to have in your arsenal of so-called right people that you employ are people that are very, very innovative. You see, the challenge that we have in strategy today still is when I consult with organizations, they split strategy and innovativeness. We're going to have a creative session. What the hell is a creative session? We're going to have an innovative session. We're going to get Stein to come and talk to us because he's got a whole lot of great ideas and that'll stimulate innovation. It's the wrong way to think about it. Strategy isn't separate from innovation. Strategy is innovation. But it's going to come from your staff. You see, one of the things that was mentioned this morning was the concept of too few places as you climb the corporate ladder. Now, let's just take that statement, because what we love to do, if I may put on my academic hat again, to venture into a dorm of freedom, is we question assumptions. You see, everything you say has got an underlying assumption. The reason why you don't have too much at breakfast is you're assuming that we're going to have lunch. And the reason why you don't necessarily, or why you would pack a fresh bottle of water into the car, is you're assuming that the next 3 hours drive to the airport, you're not going to be able to stop somewhere to get fresh water. Most of the things you do and we say is based on assumption. Let's look at the underlying assumption of there's limited amount of space as you climb the corporate ladder. Any organization operates in an environment. Okay? So this is what we do. We scan that environment to gather information. We get the information, we give it to the clever people, and they craft scenarios to us. And they give us a couple of scenarios, A, B, C. We give it to more clever people, they run it through the systems, they apply some statistic methodology and programming on it, and they say that the scenario B is the one with the highest likelihood. The one with the highest likelihood of materializing. And then we decide, okay, if that's the one with the highest probability, let's choose a strategy. So we choose the strategy, and we're going to have a growth strategy. And part of our growth is going to be geographical growth, so we're going to venture into Africa. Right. Now I need to structure that business, because that's the sequence of our thoughts. But look at the assumption, ladies and gentlemen. The assumption is decades old. First and foremost, most of us, when we scan the environment, maybe I should just use some of the slides. I've said all of this just in a different way, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. Most of us, when we scan the environment, draw something that looks like that. So we go, we say, right, we have our business internally, and we have what Porter would call a competitive environment. So we use Porter's 5 forces, and we have buyers, and we have suppliers, and substitute products, and competitors. And then we have a so-called larger, more macro environment out there. Most of you might know it as a pestle. Politics, economy, social trend changes, technology, legislation, and green environment. Now here's the challenge, ladies and gentlemen. If you draw the environment like that, you're assuming it looks like that. Now whether you're assuming it looks like that or not, once you've drawn it like that, everything that you're going to plan from here onwards is based on the assumption that the environment really looks like that. And that's the assumption I'm questioning. Because you see, if you have an organization that's based on that assumption, yes, then you're going to have a challenge, because then you're going to have less places in the pyramid of the organization as you climb the corporate culture. Because how does a normal organization function? It assumes first and foremost that it is only in one industry. Because Porter told us that. When you scan the environment, you have to scan your industry. You have to look at competition in your industry. And with that, you're assuming again that the competition cannot come from outside the industry. Mistake? Big mistake. Let me tell you why that's a mistake. Let me tell you a story, case study. I assume that person has left the building. It's probably more nice videos. He does that to me. Right. Let me give you an example. When Napster came along, at the time when Napster came along, there was it's a very well recorded case study. I don't have the detail here because I didn't think that I'm going to say to you what I'm saying to you now, but so far so good. Let me make the point. When Napster came around, there was a very well-known, very popular beer, but it was a local beer in a student town in the United States of America. It's almost like those of you who studied at Stellenbosch, close to my hometown. If you were a student, you'll know the red wine called Tassenberg. So if I see some smiles, it's a very well-known red wine, but it's predominantly known by people that studied there. So it's a local brand, it's not a national brand. Tassis, there we go. So we have the students and they're consuming the beer, and they're consuming a lot of it. And all of a sudden, bang, the sales bomb out. So, what do? We bring in the cavalry, we bring in the consultants. And what does the consultants do? They look at the industry. So they look at substitute products. Pardon, no disrespect, but we sometimes call it the girly drinks, the breezes and the Bacardis, and you know, so it's like the female version of the beer that was traditionally always only a man's drink. Okay, so they look at that. Why? Because they're assuming that this beer is in the beer industry. Obviously, they didn't go and look at substitutes like water and juice or whatever. Again, we're talking students here. So they do more research and more research and more research and more research. And then interestingly enough, and that's why I'm such a big fan of SAB, because the penny dropped for them. Interestingly enough, they started to put together a profile of the average beer consumer. And they found that one of the things that you need a lot of, yes, capacity, money, but the biggest thing is time. You need time to consume a lot of beer. So for students it was easy. Well, go over to a sports club or sports pub over the weekend, and while they're watching American football or whatever else, they're just the whole day there, they're just slouching around and they're pinting away. And before the end of the day, maybe each one of them consumed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 beers, I don't know, a hell of a lot. And all of a sudden, they're not in the pubs anymore, they're gone. At the same time, Napster brought out here software which enabled you to download music from the internet. It was at the turn of the century, more or less. You could make your own DVDs and everything else. And all of a sudden, they're finding all of these students in their dorms over weekends, downloading music. And then the penny dropped for the beer company, where they realized, oh damn, we're not in the beverage industry, after all. We're in the entertainment industry. We've been bumped by something that doesn't look like a bottle of beer at all. Just a better form of entertainment. If, however, you are a beer provider or beer manufacturer, and you think that you're only in the beer industry, you will, like Porter told you, only scan that part of the environment. So you will have an organization that has to remain sustainable based on that one industry. And that's why you have a pyramid structure. What if you don't go for sustainable competitiveness? You see, because the bugger about sustainable competitiveness is it means you have to keep on doing what you're doing. So if I'm making pizzas, I need to be able to keep on making pizzas for the next 10 years, 20 years. If I'm building motor vehicles, I need to keep on doing this for the next 10 years, next 20 years. Because that's the industry I'm in. Driven by sustainable competitiveness. What if I can make use of shorter term opportunities? Well, then all of a sudden, my structure doesn't need to be a pyramid. It becomes flat. Because what I then do is I open the floor. I now have 5 managers or 10 managers or 20 managers. And none of those managers can rest assured that this company is going to remain sustainably competitive just doing this. They need to find me new, shorter term opportunities. In other words, They need to look for business opportunities outside of the industry that they think they're in. Am I losing you? Let me give you another example, just in case I'm losing you. If you go to the gym in Sandton and you use a Garmin as a GPS, as you leave the gym and you switch your Garmin on, the Garmin by default asks you 5 questions about the experience you just had at the gym. On the screen. You can override it if you want to, but it's on the screen. So what did Garmin do? What was the question they asked themselves? They asked themselves this: if you think of Garmin, what industry do you think a Garmin is in? What would you say?
Navigation.
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 Fitness.
That's what. Navigation. It makes so much sense, obvious. What industry are they actually in?
Point of sale location services.
Information. They're in information. And the day that that penny dropped, not from the CEO, but from a staff member, that said, hell, you know what, this is actually what we're doing. They said, okay, well, this opens up a whole new line of industries that we can play in. We can now, amongst other, play in the market research industry. So we can go to organizations and we can say to them, hell, did you know, if somebody wants to come to your gym, they type in Sandton, Virgin Active, it's registered. We pick it up on the software so we know that that person has spent some time there from the time they switched off their vehicle, because the Garmin goes off automatically, and an hour later they switch it on again. So the assumption is fair that they've been in the gym for an hour, and we can now give you those the answers to the 5 most important questions. What was the experience like? What was the staff like? Did you stand in the queue for a treadmill? Was the weights area sweaty and smelly? 5 immediate questions, which in turn Virgin Active can now relate to real-time feedback all the time about their customers, as opposed to having to bring in a consulting firm or a research firm once a year and say, we want you to do a survey for us. Can you see the difference? Now what happens to Garmin? What happens to Garmin is more or less this. If I can draw it, more or less this. There's the so-called corporate ladder. The not enough space as you climb the corporate ladder picture. But the minute Garmin realizes that we're not in navigation, we're actually in information, it does that. It grows another head. And another head. Another head. So what you're actually doing by making innovativeness and creativity part of strategy is you are breaking with the assumption that we need to be sustainable in what we're doing now until kingdom comes. That's the difference. Gabish? Make sense? That's what I want to challenge you with. In your matrix, when you appoint the EQ measurement that was mentioned, that's but one dimension. I strongly think what we should start to look at in some form of a structured way is how are we going to incorporate the innovativeness into our structure of employment. I'm almost out of time. I said just about nothing that I have prepared, but I think at the end of the day I said what I wanted to say. So let me just double check here whether I have covered everything. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, just very quickly, e-learning. E-learning is the simplest thing in the world to do. The simplest thing in the world to do. We just need to change our attitude about it. I lecture for an online university in Dubai. It's interesting. 6 years ago when I lectured, I always thought that e-learning is something that's done by people that can't afford to really study. Sort of looked down at it. When I applied for the position in Dubai, they said, what do you mean you don't have online experience? They asked it to me as if I was from space. The world is doing it. So what we need to do is just to change our approach around that. E-learning is something that needs to happen, not just from a CEO perspective, but from the type of market, my son's market that we're dealing with. I wanted to say something about Marikana, but I'm not going to get there. Oh yeah, let me quickly say something about Marikana. How am I doing for time, Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Am I still okay? Okay.
You're still okay.
This is the point.